just want to introduce the drum. I'm going to be doing an offering to open us up, and then we'll be doing a live acknowledgement to receive us in this Ohlone Nation. Thank you. Just wanted to acknowledge Mother Earth, center ourselves into this very powerful conversation about how to protect the land and how to show up as allies to this community. I'm an indigenous person in the diaspora of the continent who attempts to center and uplift and follow the leadership of our indigenous voices and elders of the front lines against state-sanctioned violence and genocide. We welcome all of us to recognize indigenous people for their everyday humanity. We humbly do this event in the Ohlone Nation, known as Tanian. In this area, we call the Anza College, Cupertino. But we acknowledge the Ohlone Nation as among the original caretakers and earth stewards who love and respect this land. The Muwekma Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area continues this legacy, as our guests will also explain how they do so with the Amah tribal nation. We understand we do this work with the contradiction that we're in occupied territory after the massacre and genocide of Ohlone and other California indigenous peoples. And supposed self-defined pioneers and settlers created Western definitions of political borders of what we know as cities and counties and states. With more conviction, we are determined to educate students on this campus and our colleagues, employees who labor here, who work here, who study, who learn here, to decolonize and deconstruct, to walk without harming yourself or the land, this space, or each other, including the plant and animal and water kingdoms, making social justice work through relationship building instead, and staying true to a way of life that involves to all my relations. In the spirit of also international solidarity, that we connect the dots with indigenous struggles here, with those of Palestine, with the folks in Kashmir, folks in Guatemala, in Ecuador, and so on, that we stay true to then uplift the current local struggles in a way that you are capable to, with all the resources that you have as privileged people to live here. And with that said, to all my relations.
Well, good morning, and thank you for being here.
Morning.
Morning.
My name is Valentin Lopez, and I'm the chairman of the Amah Mutsun tribal band. And our tribe was comprised of descendants of the indigenous peoples that were taken to Mission San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz. Our creation story takes place at Mount Amah. You've probably seen it. In Los Gatos, you look up into the peaks of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and you see a little a cement block at the very top, a little cube. That's Mount Amah. At one time, that was the tallest peak in the Santa Cruz Mountains. But the military came by and lopped off a part of the top to flatten it so they could put radar towers up there during the Cold War. And that desecrated one of our sacred sites in the place of our creation. Our creation story tells us that Mother Earth, that it's our responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. Our tribe is the only ones that have the moral authority to speak for our territory. It's the same for all tribes. They have the moral authority to speak for their lands, their traditional territory. That's moral authority. That's the authority given to us by Creator or by God. No one else has that responsibility. And that's important to realize these lands. The indigenous voice must be followed when it comes to finding out, when it comes to understanding how these lands must be taken care of. With that directive to take care of Mother Earth and all living things, our people started working very hard to learn how to take care of the four-legged, the insects, the fungi, the plants, the fin, the birds, the fog, the rocks, the shadows. Those are all our responsibility. Our people worked hard for thousands and thousands of years to know how to take care of these things. And they learned how to do it in a very effective way, a very sustainable way, a way that would have carried them through until the last sunrise. We need to get back on that path, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. The central coast of California and inland to this valley here. This was the most populated area of indigenous people north of Mexico City. Did you know that? No. This had very heavy population of indigenous people. Our people lived here for 12, 14, 15,000 years or more. And if you think of that in terms of generations, that'd be 800, 900, maybe 1,000 generations or more. That's how long our people lived here. And then, in 1769, the colonizers came. The Spaniards and the missions came to California. And a lot of people think that they came to evangelize the indigenous people in the same manner as Jesus Christ, to evangelize in the name of Jesus. Nothing could be further than the truth. Nothing. Whenever the missionaries and the Spaniards came, they came to fulfill the directives from the papal bulls. Please study the papal bulls. Those papal bulls, there's a number of them. There was a papal bull in 1453 that was passed by, put out by Pope Alexander VI. That papal bull said that all indigenous people are heathens, pagans, and savages. That indigenous people have no soul. And that's an important one. Because if you do not have a soul, you're not a human being. And if you're not a human being, they can kill you. They can rape you. They can enslave you. They can torture you. They can do whatever they want to you, and it's not a sin. Because you are not a human being. The papal bull said that all indigenous people are the enemies of Jesus Christ. That indigenous people were to be put into perpetual slavery. That indigenous people were to have their properties and their possessions taken from them. That's exactly what they did to indigenous people around the world. If you're indigenous, that is your history, as well as ours. That is your history. Those papal bulls go out into the world and discover all these new lands. Discover all these new lands and claim them for their home country. That's when France went out, Spain, Portugal, England, they started going out and discovering these new lands. They wanted to discover them for those European nations, and it also said that they were to be, the indigenous people were to be converted to be Christians, or they were to be killed. It was forced assimilation. And if you don't assimilate, you will die. That is your history. If you're indigenous, that is your history. You were to assimilate or to die. In the early 1500s, Portugal went down into Spain. No, excuse me. They went into Africa, and they started capturing Africans and selling them into slavery around the world. Over 20 million Africans were captured and sold into slavery around the world. After Africa, they went to India, and then they went to Indonesia, and then they went to the Pacific Islands, and they came to the Americas. Reminder, that doctrine of discovery said if they do not assimilate, they must die. As a part of that conquest, over 300 million indigenous people died as a result of that doctrine of discovery. 300 million indigenous people. Look at the history of the Americas. Look at the United States. All the people died. They were all gone. Because of that moral authority given to these European nations by the Pope that said we were to assimilate or we were to die. That is our history. So when the missions came, that's what they came to put into place. A total domination, of slavery, of forced assimilation, and if you don't assimilate, you were killed. And you didn't have a soul, none of that was a sin. It was not a sin. It was not a crime. It was not an offense at all. It was just fulfilling the directive from the Pope. Our history is brutal. If you're indigenous, your history is brutal. A lot of times I like to go on for 2-3 hours. How many of you have that kind of time? Okay, I better cut it short. So I'm not going to go into all the details of the mission period. The Mexican period was brutal for us. Absolutely brutal. Slavery, rape, murder. That all happened under the Mexican period. People don't talk about that. But that Mexican period was brutal. And then came the American period. The very first governor of California, Peter J. Burnett, said in the very first in his very first State of the Union of California, he said that there will be a war of extermination against the California Indians. That is to be expected. The governor is saying that all California Indians were to be exterminated. How do you like that? church coming after us. We have Spain coming after us. We have Mexico coming after us. Now we have the Americans in the California period coming after us. What did they do? One of the first treasury bonds that was passed by the state of California. And you know, they passed treasury bonds for the public good. They passed it for schools, school bonds, parks, roadways, waterways, etc. Well, one of the very first bonds that was passed by the state of California was to pay for the extermination of California Indians. People were investing into California government bonds. And that investment was for the purpose of killing and exterminating Indians. And with that money, they paid bounties, 25 cents to $5 for every dead Indian. That's how that government money was spent. California is the last place on earth where they had government-sponsored bounty and government-sponsored militias who were paid to go out, search out people, and kill them, all with the authority of the government. That happened right here. Right here. They passed bonds. That money, they went up, and the militias, they would go up, going out and up into the mountains because of the gold countries. They went up there to search out the Indians and to kill them. And they received the money for every scalp. In 1873, the Santa Cruz Sentinel newspaper, which was still existing then and exists today, put out one of those little legal notices that said, the county of Santa Cruz would no longer pay bounty money. They had paid bounty money for over 20 years for dead Indians. That was horrible. In our history, those 3 periods of brutal colonization, what they wanted is they wanted to destroy our culture. They wanted to destroy our humanity. They wanted to destroy our environment. They believed that our food plants were totally inferior to what they had in Europe. They believed our grazing grasses for the animals were inferior. And so then they bring in their grazing grasses, the oats, and the other grazing grasses. And they grow much faster than our native plants, because our native plants have a responsibility to take care of a community of the fungi, the insects, the birds, the four-legged, etc. So our plants are very hardy, but they grow slower. Those European grazing plants did not do that, so they grew fast and shaded out all of our native plants. Today, when you drive down Highway 101, Highway 280, Highway 17, no matter which highway you drive down, look at the grasses in the mountains and the hills and the landscapes. Those are 96, 98% non-native, gone. But those native plants, they were our foods, our medicines, our basket trees, our materials for building our houses and making our clothing. They just totally destroyed that. We had nothing of value to give to them, to provide. Nothing of value. We had 8 different kinds of California Indian potatoes. How many of you know that there's such a thing as a California Indian potato? We had California Indian onion, carrots, celery. A lot of our seed plants are very important and food plants with high nutritional value. Gone. Today our tribe is working to bring back all of our food plants. Soon you'll be able to have those food plants and to learn about them. time was quickly running out, guys. The destruction of native people never ended. It never ended. It just evolved to what we see today. These immoral laws. These laws, they continue to destroy our culture, our environments, and our spirituality. And there's probably no better example in our region than what's happening at Eurostock. That petition that's going around now, asking you to sign it. That's on Eurostock. Eurostock is at the southern end of Gilroy. And it is at the bottom of the Santa Cruz Mountains, at the southernmost point of the Santa Cruz Mountains. The next range up is the Gavilon Range. But here at Eurostock, that was our most sacred site. That's where our most important ceremonies were held. Eurostock translates to the place of the big head. And our big head ceremonies were our most important. At Eurostock, that was also the home of our spiritual leader, Kutsui. We had 4 villages living around, or living on Eurostock, for the purpose of maintaining those lands as sacred and worthy of ceremony, worthy of having ceremony, calling Creator forth so He can hear our messages, hear our prayers, know what's in our hearts, our minds, our bodies, our spirits. It was a very important site, Eurostock. And our people were there for thousands and thousands of years. We took care of the landscape so that it provided for the 4-legged, the winged, the finned, etc. And then the Spanish came and the missions came. And our people were removed and taken to the missions. That's when prayer and ceremony at Eurostock ended. When the missions closed in 1833, a number of our ancestors who survived went to Eurostock, and they wanted to restore and return to the world they knew. But of course that could not happen. That could not happen. And then just years later, they were permanently removed from that land. There was a smallpox epidemic. 90% of the people got it and died. The rest were removed from the land. I'll just throw this in. They had a vaccine for smallpox, but it was illegal to give that vaccine to Indians. It was illegal. Eurostock then went into ranching lands, and it changed hands a number of times. But Eurostock went into bankruptcy in about 2015, I think it was. And then a group of investors bought it. And that investor group, what they do is they buy distressed properties, and they try to find a way to monetize it, to make money as quickly as they can, and to flip it. So the good examples here at Eurostock. Their goal there is to do sand, mining of sand and gravel. They're not going to do the mining. They just want to get that permit and then sell the land with that permit, and then let these other people whose business is mining go on in and actually do the mining. So they just want to get that permit. But the value of Eurostock is about $30 million. But if they get that permit, they can sell that property for up to $120 million. How's that for a quick profit in a matter of a couple of years? But has no recognition of spirituality or culture. all it recognizes is dollars. We ask the students here at Eurostar to please get involved. Help us protect it. You're very important here at the Anza. This is very important because you're in Santa Clara County. We're talking to other universities and community colleges, etc. But many of them are outside Santa Clara County. So their voice isn't as important as yours. It's not as important as yours. So please get involved and help us. Please get involved and help us. Our Amah Mutsun tribe is coming back. We have an Amah Mutsun land trust. We're restoring the traditional way our ancestors took care of Mother Earth. And if you'd like to learn more about that, go to our website, amahmutsunlandtrust.org, and learn about how we're restoring traditional stewardship of the lands. And soon, for the past 4 years, we've been doing research on how our ancestors took care of the oceans and the coastline and the fish and the seaweed and the shellfish and the sea mammals. And then yesterday we attended, the last 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, we attended a conference in Santa Rosa with other tribes. And it's time for us to start stewarding the oceans as well, and to and to bring health back to the oceans. We need to restore balance to Mother Earth. If we're going to do that, you know, a lot of people think that science is the answer to climate change. Science is the one that created the problem. Einstein said that the thinking that created the problem is not the kind of thinking that's going to solve the problem. We need new ways of thinking. We need new ways of thinking. And we believe that our ancestors showed us how that is to do, how that is to work. If you're involved and you care about climate change, work with indigenous communities and follow their lead. That's what we need to do. I'm going to open it up for questions now. Are there any questions?
Just for a second.
Sometimes they get passionate. You guys have to see that sometimes.
Awesome, thank you. Questions, comments, anything anybody wants to say? It takes a little bit to get into the more active mode. While you're thinking about that, I want to say that NITA has an environmental group called Students for Environment and Equity at Anza, and we're working on getting highway money moved over to public transportation money. We're also working on getting some of the financing for fossil fuels, and we're also going to be working on this project. That group meets in the East Cottage 12:30 on Friday if you want to come and pick up some of the work around this. So now, have you got a question? Or a comment, or just something to say? Always want to start with students. Sorry, thank you.
Hello. I saw earlier on the map that the Eurostar quarry thing is right off the 101.
Correct.
There was a photo earlier of like a quarry. Is that in process right now? And is that the one that was right next to the 101?
I believe that quarry that they showed was an open pit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is an open pit that's directly across the street. Well, across the street, a couple miles down the road. That's what that quarry is there. That's where that photo was taken from. But that's what they're going to do here.
Comments?
Can you do?
Can you just talk about some of the endangered wildlife, or the way that this project would harm fragile wildlife or plants, animal species?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, this is an important corridor, wildlife corridor. We need to protect this because this is where animals can pass north to south and east to west. It's a very important wildlife corridor. The mining operation comes here. It'll be in place for 30 years. And we'll lose that. Perhaps no species is more important or more impacted than the mountain lion. Because now there is no real corridor for them to get out of the Santa Cruz Mountains. I believe there's like 67, 68, 69 mountain lions in Santa Cruz. And they're really inbreeding a lot. And it's really, and it is endangering the species. And so we need to find a way to get the mountain lions to follow that corridor and to go east and to go south into the other mountain ranges. And protecting your stock is important for that. Plus there's badgers here. And badgers are fierce. Badgers are fierce. If they're on the road and there's a truck coming down the road, they're going to try and take it on. That's how fierce they are. But they're also very threatened. And they need to be protected. There's very important species like red-legged frog. Some of the largest red-legged frogs I ever seen are on this property. It's just incredible what they have there. When you walk through the waterways, the creeks and the rivers and streams, there's a lot of waterways there. There's Tar Creek, Tick Creek, the Paja Road, the Sergeant Creek, and a few others. And those are very important because they allow a lot of underground recharge to take care of to replenish the water supply underground. But if this mining operation goes in there, those creeks, many of those creeks will be destroyed. And then what's going to happen, you know, the sand and the gravel, it allows the water to be absorbed or to percolate down underneath to the water storage in the ground. But without that sand and gravel, what happens is whenever the storms hit, the water is just going to run down into the Paja and go out to the oceans. And it's not going to be stored underground. That's going to have a tremendous impact on wildlife. Because the underground storage is what feeds those springs year-round. The wildlife come to this area in the summertime because they know those springs are always flowing and they can get fresh water there. But you allow this project to happen and it's going to dry up those springs. And that water will not be stored. And it's going to pollute the rivers again. About 8, 9, 10 years ago, the Paja River, which is the main river here on Eurostock, was recognized as the most polluted river in the United States, or one of the top most polluted rivers in the United States. And they put a lot of money into restoring it and everything else. And then now they're considering, and a lot of that destruction of that river was caused by mines. And so if they allow this mining operation to work, I mean, all that work to restore that river would be for nothing. We've lost. I'll stop there. Are there other questions?
Other questions from students? All right.
Do you mind briefly to explain the proposal and the bill amounts in the current county? Because I know the Morgan Hill just passed a bill or something because they were going to protect the land, but I don't know if it's a county-wide thing or just certain city can do that.
Okay, you're talking about the resolution?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could I just add a little bit to that too? Just wondering if any of the supervisors have come out, you know, in support of what you're asking for.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you can imagine, this is a very political proposal for homeless. They need it for roadways, etc. And so there's pressure there to approve this mining permit. Plus the general plan or the regulations allow this thing to have an easy path for approval. We are a federally recognized tribe. There's no laws in the books that allow us to fight to protect our property, our sacred sites and our cultural sites. There's no laws that give protection to that. I say that all we have are two ways of fighting this thing. First is to ask for really strong community support. And that's why we're here, and I'll get to that resolution in a minute. And then the second thing is just basically to beg. And we beg, please, don't destroy our most sacred site. We beg. And so for that public support part of it, we've been speaking out quite a bit, trying to get the public to recognize the position of the Amah Mutsun, recognize how critically, culturally, and spiritually sensitive this area, Juristock, is, and also to recognize the environmental values that are at Juristock, with the wildlife and importance for the air quality, water quality, important for the native plants, etc. It's a very important spot. And so, we're asking the communities to please work with the Amah Mutsun. And we have developed a number of organizations. We have a Friends of Juristock in Santa Cruz. And we have a Friends of Juristock and the indigenous, we have a Friends of Juristock and also the indigenous solidarity group working with us as well. And there's a Friends group that's forming down in the Morgan Hill Gilroy area. So if you want to help us, it's really good to get involved with these organizations. And then, like say for example today we asked people to come and help us, and that's why Nestor's here today, helping us with this effort right here. And they show up and help us whenever we can. So we ask you to get involved. And did that answer your question? Yes? Okay.
Good. I saw another hand up a second ago. Who was that? Was that you? Yeah.
So my question is kind of, what is the legality behind Juristack? I wasn't sure if I understood you right, but Juristack is privately owned. So what would be kind of what you have to do to protect it? That's my question.
Okay. It's kind of like what I said, is that there are no laws on the books that will protect our culture, our spirituality. We are federally unrecognized. We have no rights whatsoever. We don't have rights, but we got a big mouth. And that's why we're here. We are asking the public to stand with the Amah Mutsun to oppose the mining permit and to put pressure on their elected officials to recognize how wrong it is to destroy native culture, native spirituality, and the environments. So that's the answer. There are no laws, but just public pressure will do it.
And can I just amplify one of the things that Lou said earlier, which is that if they don't get that permit, the land isn't worth they can't monetize it. And so that's why that permit is such a crucial piece of it, right? We're not saying like take the land away from these private people, but take the profit away and the game changes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And just so you know, conservation organizations, and this is what I'm led to believe, conservation organizations have come together and offered to buy this property at its appraised value. And that's a standing offer. If they wake up tomorrow morning and say, I think I'll sell the property, that offer's there. And they can get the appraised value, the fair market value for that property. But they're not interested in fair market value. interested in just maximizing profits and greed. So that's what's happening there in Eurostock now.
Edmundo, did you?
Thank you for being here. Thank you for the work you're doing. We can work together on this. I wanted to first give a shout out to the student body who voted recently to change the school mascot from the Dons, the colonizers, to the mountain lion, which is specifically indigenous to this area. So
Outstanding. Thank you.
Also, wonder, I have property in Morgan Hill, but I live in Oakland, and there we've got this land trust going on
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And there's also the Su'umi land tax. It's a voluntary tax, but it's asking anybody who owns property who lives in the area to contribute voluntarily toward the land trust. Is there something similar that can be done for the Amah, Mutsun and folks in this area?
Well, we're looking into that now, and we may have something similar to that coming up in the future. But but we do receive from a number of our friends and supporters of our land trust ongoing donations. You can go onto our Amah Mutsun Land Trust website and make a donation if you want to make it on an ongoing basis. That's one of the features that's available. Thank you.
So I think in the interest of some people respecting people's time, let's bring this to a close, but if people want to stay and talk for a few minutes, you're welcome to do that. So let's just really thank Valentin so much for coming. Yeah, and so anybody who wants to say and talk, we can still use the mics and have it be, just keep going for a little bit.
I just wanted to let anyone know that was interested in learning more about the environmental aspects. I teach environmental science, and next quarter my colleague Adrian Frisbee and myself are teaching conservation bio. We are actually leading from an indigenous perspective, and I'd like to speak with you about that afterwards. So look for it on the schedule if you're interested in taking it. We have some openings.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. That was good. Yeah, we got tons over there. Oh, you already filled it out? Yeah. Yeah, it's over there.
Do we have to do the full first name?